My name is Osei-Frimpong, and we're doing a special Martin Luther King Jr. Day because I think a lot of people screw this up, and I want to do it well, right? And honestly, when I moved down south, one of the most disappointing things about living in South when Martin Luther King Jr. Day comes up is that I see a lot of black people who blame black people. Like, I go to a Martin Luther King Jr. Day event, and it's usually some black person who blames black children for being black, and I don't like doing that. So this is going to be better than that. We're going to go through one of his speeches, Showdown for Nonviolence. It's the speech he was set to give the week he was assassinated, and so they just released it a week after. And I think it goes through a lot of the moves, and I also think it explains why they took now to assassinate him. So we're going to go through the speech. I'll just read it and bring it up for everyone to watch. I'll also put it in the description of this video. I'll put it in the description of the video after the video is gone, and it'll be great. So let's go ahead, Matthew, hit the beat.
To the beat, y'all.
Yeah. Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I paint the White House black and ain't no future in your front.
Showdown for Nonviolence. Dr. King had already been assassinated by James Earl Ray in Memphis, Tennessee on the 4th of April, 1968, when this article appeared. The worst period of racial rioting in the U.S. history erupted. This article prophesied that these riots would occur because America was reaping the harvest of hate and shame planted through generation of educational denial, political disenfranchisement, and economic exploitation of its black population. And so, this is the article proper, or the speech proper. The policy of federal government is to play Russian roulette with the riots. It is prepared to gamble that with another summer of disaster. Despite 2 consecutive summers of violence, not a single basic cause of the riots has been corrected. All of the misery that stoked the flames of rage and rebellion remains undiminished, with unemployment, intolerable housing, and discriminatory education a scourge of the Negro ghettos. Congress and the administration still tinker with trivial, half-hearted measures. All right, that sounds like it could be written pretty much today.
Yeah,
I think that sounds like it could be written today. Go ahead and give me. There was another black USB here. I think it was on the.
Yeah, like that literally.
Yeah, check on that. There's
literally could come out today.
That could come out today.
Except we haven't been violent. That's the only.
Well, I think they moved the violence to prison.
Oh,
right. So I think actually the thing about nonviolent civil disobedience is that if you could shame white people in public with press about how they're being violent on your bodies, then you could actually move politics. So now if we get the violence into prison, there are no cameras there. There's no press there. And so that's why I think they actually...
and now they're making television shows about it.
Yeah.
So they can profit off that too.
Yeah. All right. So I think there's a
60 day, like,
oh, that's not it. All right. So is there another one? Is there another?
oh, yeah,
Another USB.
I did.
If not, then okay. All right. So it just turns out that there it is. It just turns out that we haven't gotten any better since 1968. The numbers are the same in terms of home improvement rate or home ownership rate. Incarceration rates have gotten a little bit higher, and
I'm about to say actually we've gotten worse.
Yeah, we've gotten worse. Right. Maybe that's not it either. Yeah, so we just haven't gotten better. It's gotten a little bit worse, and I don't know the stories people tell themselves about how we have gotten better. We're still in the same spot. Incarceration rate's a little bit worse. Home ownership rate's the same, and education attainment's the same. So like we're the same. I think we maybe get more degrees, but we have more loans. It just doesn't matter. So
I'm impressed that home ownership's the same because we were talking about this previously.
41%.
Oh, is
thing is, I talked to someone. They said that 41% is doctored from 68. So it was like 53% in 68 and 41% now. So it's probably gotten worse.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking back. Like I said, both my grandparents owned homes.
Yeah. And their grandkids do not.
Their children do not.
There's one more USB if you want to check.
Check one more USB for the numbers. Anyway, so King just argues that those are the problems then, and I think those problems are still with us. And so let's go on. Yet only a few years ago, there was discernible, if limited, progress through nonviolence. Each year, a wholesome, vibrant Negro self-confidence was taking shape. The fact is inescapable that the tactic of nonviolence, which had then dominated the thinking of the civil rights movement, has in the last 2 years not been playing its transforming role. Nonviolence was a creative doctrine in the South because it checkmated the rabid segregationists who were thirsting for an opportunity to physically crush Negroes. Right? So, like I said, if I'm right and the violence moved into the prison, we're still being crushed and it's still violent. It's just not in view of cameras and newspapers.
By choice. Like, I think that's an active choice they're making to not pay attention to those things. Because they seem, like I said, they seem to be really good at putting shows about prison on TV real quick.
Right. All right. So, yeah, I would love to study prisons, but it's hard to do it. Actually, physically, it's actually hard to do it. Anyway, nonviolence was a creative doctrine in the South because it checkmated the rabid segregationists who were thirsting for an opportunity to physically crush Negroes. Nonviolent direct action enabled the Negro to take to the streets in active protest, but it muzzled the guns of the oppressor because he could not shoot down in daylight unarmed men, women, and children. This is the reason there was less loss of life in 10 years of Southern protests than in 10 years of Northern riots. There are a lot of heads being cracked. But there are a few people just being shot by the police at a nonviolent protest than there were just like shot by the police at a riot. All right, so that's true.
And currently, they're just being shot in broad daylight. They're
just being shot.
Yeah.
It's colonial governance.
Men, women, and children are no longer safe in broad daylight if they're black.
Right. Today, the northern cities have taken on the conditions we faced in the South. Police, National Guard, and other armed bodies are feverishly preparing for repression. Yeah, you see that. There was a great, I wish I had that picture. There was a lot of cities have SWAT gear. Not SWAT gear, like tanks. And like not just Humvees, but like more tankish looking things to put down the random Negro. There was
Is it ATVs? What they call?
They're not pretty vehicles.
Yeah.
Well, there was a housing protest in Oakland, and there were some pictures of the vehicles that were Moms Demand Housing or something like that. Moms for Housing. And the vehicles that were dispatched to take care of these moms were just ridiculous. And the tactical gear.
And it doesn't take a city like Oakland, because if I've paid attention, I think we have similar type, at least one vehicle.
Yeah. Apparently,
here.
we have one enormous vehicle that takes something like $200,000 a year to maintain.
And
staff. And
we're a small, quote unquote, college town.
Right. Just in case, I don't know, it's Red Dawn. And like we get invaded.
No, they ain't worried about invasions. They worried about the ones that are here.
They're not invasions. They're worried about insurrections. All right.
There's a reason why they tore down housing to put that police station across the way.
Yeah. All right. So today, the northern cities have taken on the conditions we face in the South, and they can be curbed not by unorganized resort to force by desperate Negroes, but only by a massive wave of militant nonviolence. Nonviolence was never more relevant as an effective tactic than today for the North. It also may be the instrument of our national salvation. All right? I agree but it's militant nonviolence. We're going to get into the details later. I agree with the President's National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders that our nation is splitting into two hostile societies and that the chief destructive cutting edge is white racism. I like how he puts a fine point on it. We can't even find civil rights leaders today who talk about white racism as a problem because it's white racism. I would say white terrorism now, but like white racism I think is effective also. All right, we need above all an effective means to force Congress to act resolutely. but means that do not involve the use of violence. For us in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, violence is not only morally repugnant, it's pragmatically barren. We feel there is an alternative both to violence and useless, timid supplications for justice. I'll say this again because I think a lot of people have gotten this confused. He was against violence, but he was also against useless, timid supplications for justice. We cannot condone either riots or the equivalent evil of passivity. The evil of passivity. Right? And we know that nonviolent militant action in Selma and Birmingham awakened the conscience of white America and brought a moribund, insensitive Congress to life. So somehow we need to wake up Congress and get them to pass legislation on our behalf. He's talking about a political revolution. Like I think that's what he's talking about. That sounds a whole lot like a political revolution. We need to,
certainly what it's going to take.
That's what it's going to take. Anything less than that, we're not going to move. We're not moving. All right. The time has come to return to mass nonviolent protests. Accordingly, we are planning a series of such demonstrations this spring and summer to begin in Washington, D.C. They will have Negro and white participation, and they will seek to benefit the poor of both races. He's talking about the Poor People's Campaign. He's talking about the Poor People's Campaign. This was the march. This was the initiation of the Poor People's Campaign. I'm not particularly impressed with its current leadership, but this is what King had in mind, right? We will call on the government to adopt the measures recommended by its own commission. He's talking about the Kerner Commission, to avoid, in the commission's word, the tragedy of continued polarization of the American community and ultimately the destruction of basic democratic values. We're not a democracy. Black people don't have rights. Black people are still scared of white people. We can't be scared of white people and still pretend that you have rights. All right? So we must have national action, compassionate, massive, and sustained, backed by the resources of the most powerful and richest nation on earth. That's the Kerner Commission report that wrote that. So it's just right. All right? The demonstrations we have planned are of deep concern to me, and I want to spell out at length what we will do, try to do, and believe in. My staff and I have worked 3 months on the planning. We believe that if this campaign succeeds, nonviolence will once again be the dominant instrument for social change. I don't want it to come to a bloody civil war. I don't want it to come to a bloody civil war. So let's make this work. And I also don't want standing black degradation.
You don't want it, but
I mean,
it can't be taken off the table.
Well, yeah, no, the status quo is not working for black people, right? And so he says, for nonviolence will once again become the dominant instrument for social change. And it wouldn't be a civil war. Like what we're talking about is bringing back, either we do this nonviolently through political means, or we bring back Reconstruction, where we just post soldiers and the National Guard works on behalf of black people.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's either Reconstruction or a different kind, like a political revolution. So either we bring the guns or we don't do it, but that's just the way it goes. Or we just continue with black degradation. And if people don't understand what black degradation means, if this is their first video, do you have the chart?
Yeah.
That's my favorite chart.
I'm about to say, the chart.
The chart. It's the chart that explains black life. That's the chart that explains black life, right? Notice that there are two lines, a blue line, which is a white median family wealth, which is about $116,000 and going up, and the black median family wealth, which is about $1,700 and going down. So it's not just that the blue line's way above the red line, it's that they're going in opposite directions. One political regime, opposite outcomes, which means pretty much we're looking at a colonial government. We're the colonized, they're the colonizers, and they exploit us for gain. All right, back to the speech.
How are we better off under Reagan? I mean,
I know. Well, some Clinton years, a lot of people made money, but we were just going up a little bit anyway. So, and the '80s when affirmative action was going, but it's still we're broke, and it's not just I know one rich Negro. No, Like we
No,
are broke.
we don't get to say that anymore. Like I'm starting to comprehend that. No, we don't.
No, we don't.
We don't know any rich Negroes.
We don't know. Like the ones we have money don't have white people money.
Yeah.
They have black people money, which isn't real money in America.
If Jeff Bezos woke up with Oprah's money tomorrow, he'd kill himself.
Like, what am I going to do?
Yeah, what? How do I survive?
How will I survive? Like, all right. So, the demonstrations are a deep concern to me. And jobs and income will be put in the hands of the tormented poor. If it fails, nonviolence will be discredited and the country may be plunged into a Holocaust, a tragedy deepened by the awareness that it was avoidable. We have preventable harms here, people. Don't let anyone tell you that they're not preventable, but they're preventable through political solutions. All right? So we're taking action before sober reflection. We have learned from bitter experience that our government does not correct the race problem until it is confronted directly and dramatically. That means directly. You can't confuse it. And by the way, I'm one of these guys who thinks that the gender issue has confused the race problem. It was brought to confuse the race problem.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So this is why since 68, we've had all of these, gender successes, but in a way that have kept black people poor.
I can't remember who said it, but there's never been a label created to actually raise a people up. Was someone said, and when I look at parts of my community right now, especially the alphabet side,
right.
I look and go, every time a new title is introduced, it's really just used to divide and conquer.
From black.
Yeah, from black people.
From black people. I would rather be T than black.
Well, I mean, remember, I use the term. I use the term GSRM because it was one of the early recommendations, but the alphabet community didn't like it because it had minority in it, and they didn't want to be associated with minorities.
I would rather I'm T first.
Yeah.
Then I'm black because
T can get you.
I'll ride this T train out.
T can get you a series on Netflix.
So
black don't get you nothing.
You're
get you jail time.
You're just extra. Could you at least be T?
RuPaul has a new series on Netflix. Just saying.
Could you at least be T? All right, so if it fails, nonviolence will be discredited, and the country may be plunged into a Holocaust, a tragedy deepened by the awareness that it was avoidable. We are taking action before sober reflection. We have learned from bitter experience that our government does not correct the race problem until it is confronted directly and dramatically, and it can't be done by reason. There needs to be some sort of drama and bring emotion into it.
Ooh.
Yeah. So,
white women tears?
Yeah. This will go through white women tears. So if you're scared of them, or if you think if she's crying, I must have done something wrong. No, if she's crying, go harder. You got to charge up that hill.
Jane Elliott. If y'all have not seen a Jane Elliott video, you
got to finish him. All right. So we know, I'm in a bit of a rush. We also know as official Washington may not, that the flashpoint of Negro rage is close at hand. I don't know. I think mass incarceration has dumbed us. Anytime anyone's slightly, there are just too many weapons to get especially black men in jail now.
Oh yeah.
Like I said, this is one of those things where I think gender's been weaponized when the target has been black men. So now it's just too easy to put black men in jail. So I don't know if Negro rage can be appropriately manifested. All right, so we're taking action after sober reflection. All right, so our Washington demonstration will resemble Birmingham and Selma in duration. It will be more than a one-day protest. It can persist for 2 or 3 months, right? So it's kind of like Occupy is what he's talking about, more. In the earlier Alabama actions, we set no time limits. We simply said we are going to struggle there until we got a response from the nation on the issues involved. Look, if you go home, you're just going home to squalor anyway. So I don't know what to tell you. You just fight until the fighting's done. We're saying the same thing about Washington. This will be an attempt to bring a kind of Selma-like movement, Birmingham-like movement into being substantially around the economic issues. So if anybody's talking about MLK today and they don't bring up the economic issues, they're doing a bad job, because that was what he was talking about the day he died. Economic issues. He wants to bring it's a poor people's campaign. Not a middle-class people's campaign. It was a poor people's campaign, right? So just as we deal with...
anyone saying that the middle class is poor, stop it. Stop. Just stop right now.
No. All right. Just as we dealt with the social problem of segregation through massive demonstrations, and we dealt with the political problem, the denial of the right to vote through massive demonstrations, we are now trying to deal with the economic problem, the right to live, to have a job and income through massive protest. It will be a Selma-like movement on economic issues. If we don't have a movement on economic issues, we are wasting our time. The road to racial justice right now goes through economics. Selma, Alabama is not some place you want to live right now because they're broke. They can all vote. They're not in jail, but we figured out a way that if you're broke, we'll just put you in jail and then you can't vote anyway. Like, we need money in black people's pockets. Racial justice comes through economic justice. At this stage, it'll come through something else later, but it comes through economic justice right now. Like I said, I think gender was a distraction, was a red herring, was a squirrel that got us running off of the wrong thing, and now it's used to blunt the economic message for black people. Because look, working class black men and women know that, like, if you can't find jobs, then everything's stressed, and then you guys get violent.
Well, I mean, and gender did a great job of giving some groups proximity to white people. So, they won.
Right.
Because that's who benefited.
You're talking to me about the sisterhood of all women. Like, black women and white women do not have that much in common.
No, and white women did not want them in their movement. Like, they act like we were always one. No, you weren't, and you're still not one.
No, they wanted to be equal with white men in subjugating everybody else.
Yes.
Like, that was the feminist movement. Like, we want to be equal with white men in subjugating the savages.
I think Bill Burr said it when he's like, white women act like they're not in the same jacuzzi as white men.
Well, they don't inherit from the same white grandparents. And yeah. All right. So, or like have joint bank accounts. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, who's paying the mortgage? You're not going to jeopardize that. So.
No, they won't.
We remember that when we began direct action in Birmingham and Selma, there was a thunderous chorus that sought to discourage us. Don't let anyone tell you that MLK was popular. Like, even black pastors didn't want him around. That troublesome Negro is going to get us killed, is what they said. There's a great book on this. One of the chapters in Lester Spence's Knocking the Hustle goes through this actually very well. But it's the truth. Like, I think Houston Baker's betrayal goes through it also. Like, they were scared of King. Even Daddy King was like, you're bringing too much heat.
Yeah.
Like, Martin Luther King Sr. was not a fan. Yet today, our achievements in these cities and the reforms that radiated from them are hailed with pride by all. We've selected 15 areas, 10 cities, and 5 rural districts from which we have recruited our initial cadre. We will have 200 poor people from each area, and that will be about 3,000 to get the protest going and set the pattern. They are important, particularly in terms of maintaining nonviolence. They are being trained in this discipline now. Education before action. You need training. You need discipline in the movement, because the goal of a protest movement, the goal of a good protest movement, is to get press. And then when you're in front of the press, you need to know what to say. You need to be able to make your claim, and make your argument. What jobs? You need the argument. So you need the ideology, then the action. If you just go with action first, then you have the microphone, then you're going to say something stupid. Right? So you need the argument. Right now, I mean, I think the biggest thing we need is federal job guarantee. We need reparations to make us whole, and then we need a federal job guarantee to get away from the conditions that made slavery so attractive to begin with. Right? Because you can't be free in a market-based society unless you have access to a job or like a lot of land. So in the areas where we are recruiting, we are also stimulating activities in conjunction with the Washington protest. We are planning to have some of the people march to Washington. We may have half the group from Mississippi, for example, go to Washington and begin the protest there, while the other half begins walking. They would flow across the South, joining the Alabama group and Georgia group, right up on through South and North Carolina and Virginia. We hope that the sound and sight of the growing mass of poor people walking slowly toward Washington will have a positive, dramatic effect on Congress. I think you need something a little bit more dramatic now. I think we got some hard scrabble politicians now. They're used to protest, and they're also used to ignoring them. So you need your press game, and you need to have the arguments right. Because once you can excite them with a protest or a spectacle, but you sustain them with the arguments and the data. Right? And without the arguments and the data, people will forget the protest. So you get them listening with the protest and the spectacle. You sustain them with the data and the arguments. That's how you keep a move. That's how you actually move forward in a way that doesn't just foment a backlash. That just wipes out the initial gains. Once demonstrations start, I feel there will be spontaneous supporting activity taking place throughout the country. This has also happened in campaigns like this, and I think it will again. I think people will start moving. The reasons we didn't choose California and other areas in the West are distance and the problem of transporting marchers that far. But part of our strategy is to have spontaneous demonstrations take place on the West Coast. Right? A nationwide non-violent movement is very important. We know from past experience that Congress and the president won't do anything until you develop a movement around which people of goodwill can find a way to put pressure on them. We need to pressure them with spectacles backed by arguments, because it really means breaking that coalition in Congress. It's still, by the way, there's a bipartisan consensus that the poor people don't matter. And there's a bipartisan consensus that black people don't matter. And that's a coalition you need to break. There are Southerners there with committee chairmanships, and they are going to stand in the way of progress as long as they can. They will get enough right-wing Midwestern and Northern Republicans to go along with them.
If only they still looked different.
Yes. Now, this is our lot right now. This really means making the movement powerful enough, dramatic enough, morally appealing enough, so that people of goodwill, churches, labor, liberals, intellectuals, students, poor people themselves. Remember, he said poor people themselves, but not only poor people themselves, because poor people themselves have other things to take care of. Right? So this is a poor people's campaign that has poor people in it, but also has everybody else who's supposed to be an ally to a poor people in it. Right? Begin to put pressure on congressmen to the point that they can no longer elude our demands. Our idea is to dramatize the whole economic problem of the poor. We feel there's a great deal that we need to do to appeal to Congress itself. Early demonstrations will be more geared toward educational purposes, to educate the nation on the nature of the problem and the crucial aspect of it, and the tragic conditions that we confront in the ghettos. Education is very important, but it needs to be an education with the drama. We need pictures. We need courageous reporting. Problem is, nobody pays for this courageous reporting. But we need to do it anyway. By the way, if you want to support my courageous reporting, you can go to www.thefunkyacademic.com and support what I do here. I'm trying to give a quality of education that people don't get in their schools, because if you didn't know about this speech before, you should have. But you know about it now because of me. So you're welcome, and please give. You can either give monthly, which I would appreciate because I have monthly bills, or you can give a one-time enormous donation. But you do it at thefunkyacademic.com. Thank you. All right. So after that, if we haven't gotten a response from Congress, we will branch out, and we are honest enough to feel that we aren't going to get any instantaneous results from Congress, knowing the recalcitrant nature on this issue, and knowing that so many resources and energies that are being used in Vietnam rather than on the domestic situation. So we don't have any illusions about moving Congress in 2 or 3 weeks, but we do feel that by starting in Washington, centering on Congress and the departments of the government, we will be able to do a real educational job. We need to make this a national issue. Right? We call our demonstration a campaign for jobs and income because we feel that the economic question is the most crucial that black people and poor people in general are confronting. There was a literal depression in the Negro community, and when you have mass employment in the Negro community, it's called a social problem. When you have mass employment in the white community, it's called a depression. The fact is, there's a major depression in the Negro community, and now we're actually physically depressed because of it. The unemployment rate is extremely high among Negro youth. It goes up as high as 40% in some cities. It's right now 40% in Chicago in 2020, in Chicago. 40% youth unemployment. All right, so this is important. This is probably the most important because this is when he talks about solutions. You're like, what are the solutions? He's very clear. We need an economic bill of rights. This would guarantee a job to all people who want to work and are able to work. It would guarantee an income for all who are not able to work. Some people are too young, some are too old, some are physically disabled. Yet in order to live, they need income. This is a market-based society. This is IME talking, not King. We live in a market-based society. You cannot be free in a market-based society unless you have access to money, right? And in order to spend that money and control production, what's being produced, not just spent, because you don't want just money but no control over production, over the goods sold or how much things cost. You need to actually have a job in the productive side of the economy, right? So you need to produce, and then you need money to spend, and that's what he's talking about. Economic Bill of Rights. We need to complete the Constitution. Completing the Constitution was not just a matter of giving black people voting rights. Completing the Constitution was giving black people an access to actually make moves in a market-based economy, right? There's a reason why we limited suffrage to property-owning white men in the at the beginning. It wasn't just because we were white supremacists. It was more like we knew that those are the only people who were economically independent, right? So in order to secure economic independence for people who don't own their own businesses, and in a market-based economy, an advanced economy, not everyone can own their business. A small business in the United States is 500 employees or less, right? So not everyone's going to own their own business. That wasn't the case in the founding of the nation. A big factory in 1776 was 10 people. That was a factory. Adam Smith, when he was talking about we need factories and free markets, the factories he was talking about was 10 people, not 500. For a small business, all right? So we need an economic bill of rights, and then if you can't work, we need a replacement income, something like disability. That's fine. But mostly we need to get people in the market-based economy, in the productive side, and we need to pay them like they matter, right? So it would mean creating certain public service jobs, but that could be done in a few weeks. You remember in the WPA, Roosevelt created, I think it was 3.5 million jobs in 2.5 months, with the only information technology he had was a rotary phone and I think carbon copies. So we can create the jobs we need to fix up the houses, and there's enough deferred maintenance in the South. Deferred maintenance and wellness checks. We're already talking about deferred maintenance, wellness checks, and reading tutors.
Yeah, that's
there's your millions jobs. Deferred maintenance in the South, reading tutors, and wellness checks on old people.
And that's not even including infrastructure.
That's not even infrastructure, but we have enough public service jobs that need to be done. So King's not wrong, right? A program that would really deal with the jobs could minimize, I don't say stop, the number of riots that could take place this summer. Our whole campaign, therefore, will center the job question with other demands like housing that are closely tied to it. We will find, example in Athens, we actually have affordable housing. The Athens isn't, the housing isn't that expensive if you want to buy. The problem is we don't pay black people. Black people can't get a good job here. There are good jobs in Athens, but they don't go to black people, not as a people. They go to white people as a people. They go to black people as an individual whose job is to manage other black people and confuse them about why they don't have a good job. All right, so we feel that much more building for housing for low-income people should be done. On the education front, the ghetto schools are in bad shape in terms of quality, and we feel that a program should be developed to spend at least $1,000 per pupil. And that's $1,000 in 1968 dollars, right? That's a lot more dollars now. Often, they're so far behind that they need special attention, the best quality education that can be given. So in a black school, you're going to need trauma-informed, because we're traumatized people. We're going to need a trauma-informed educational curriculum that deals with what it is to be black in a society that has, for most of its society, hated black people. All right? These problems, of course, are overshadowed by the Vietnam War. We'll focus on the domestic problems, but it's inevitable that we've got to bring out the question of the tragic mix-up of priorities. We are spending all of the money for death and destruction and not nearly enough money for constructive development. All right, so I don't have time to read the entire speech because I have to go pick up my kids from daycare, but I am going to read one more section. The American people are more sensitive than Congress. Lewis Harris poll that revealed that 56% of white people feel that some kind of program should come into being to provide jobs for all who want to work. We had a WPA when the nation was on the verge of bankruptcy. We should be able to do something when we're sick with wealth and racism. I added that last bit. All right. The poll that showed that 57% of people felt that slums should be eradicated and the communities rebuilt by those who live in them, which would be a massive job program. The data, I'm also going to put a link to the data on a federal job guarantee. It's very good. Even people in the South, I think 70% of Georgians support a federal job guarantee. They don't support welfare, but if you got a job program, they'll support a federal job guarantee because they know that without a job, you're not actually free in these United States, right? So I'll put the entire speech in the both the comment section and the description for this video. And this is the speech you read with your family. Showdown for Nonviolence. And I'll also put the data on the polling data on the federal job guarantee.
This needs to be what we distribute on Martin Luther King Day.
I think so. This is the speech, guys. All right, thank you for your time. If you like what I'm doing or support what I'm doing, please. This show doesn't pay for yourself, and by doing this show, I'm making myself darn white unemployed. I might have slipped. I'm making myself darn white unemployable. I'm making myself darn right unemployable because you can't go both after feminists and white conservatives. That just means you're just not looking for a job, right? So, and I'm going after both because I do think that we need to center the economic question for black communities, which will include making sure women are independently taken care of and have a chance to thrive alongside men. But right now, give me the present data. Mm-hmm. Let's stop pretending that black men are not thriving. I mean, let's stop pretending that the prison data. That's the other chart. The other chart. That's very important. Let's stop pretending that Let's stop pretending that white women are losing and black men are winning. Is what I'm saying. Because if someone just showed you that data, you would think that, wow, you have an entire political economy in the most carceral nation in the world has ever known that's kind of organized to decriminalize white lady life.
I would love to just take that bottom part off and show that to somebody and see what they thought that represented.
Yeah, well, if you ask me, I just think that white women are just as violent as white men. It's just that they've outsourced their violence to the police.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you look at child
every
abuse.
Every time Becky pulls that phone out.
Oh, child abuse, sometimes the father's hitting the father's hit. Yeah, but oftentimes, the wife says, well, you need to discipline that child. Which is pretty much the same as discipline. If you expect, I don't know. So I think it's a red herring. We need to give everyone jobs and to do public work and pay the people to produce the market economy that makes us thrive. There's enough work to be done. Read the whole speech. I'll see you next week. Got to go pick up my kids from daycare. Peace.